It's been a month since 4-year-old Gus Lamont vanished without a trace from his family's Outback property in South Australia. 30 days of searching, 30 days of silence, and yet not a single clue has explained how a little boy could disappear so completely from open country, in daylight, under the watch of those who loved him. The case has haunted Australia, not just for its mystery, but for its silence. Because every detail that should make sense, a footprint that led nowhere, a search that covered thousands of hectares but turned up nothing, and a family caught between heartbreak and suspicion. But recently, new information and a few overlooked details have begun to shift the story. Hints that maybe, just maybe, everyone missed something crucial in those first few hours. Something that could finally explain what really happened to Gus Lamont. This is the mystery of the disappearance that stopped a nation, and tonight, we're gonna break it down piece by piece to uncover what we all missed. You're watching Shadow Detective, the channel that explores real mysteries with depth, empathy, and evidence. Before we begin, take a second to support the channel, like this video, subscribe, and comment below where you're watching from, and tell us what you think really happened that afternoon on the Lamont property. Now, let's get into it. The case of Augustus Gus Lamont began like so many missing child reports, quiet, sudden, and unthinkable. Gus was just 4 years old, a lively, curious boy growing up on his family's remote property, about 40 kilometers south of Yanta in South Australia's Outback. The homestead Oak Park Station sits on over 6,000 hectares of rugged terrain, endless flat plains, red earth, dry shrubs, and a silence that stretches for miles. On the afternoon of September 27, 2025, Gus had been playing outside near the house, a small mound of dirt he loved to climb. His grandmother, watching from the kitchen window, could see him just moments before he vanished. By 5:30 p.m., when she went outside to call him in, he was gone. No sound, no movement, no sign of where he went. Within minutes, panic set in. The family searched every corner of the property, calling his name, checking water tanks, sheds, fences, and the dirt tracks leading out into the open scrubland. But there was nothing. No footprints, no discarded clothing, just an empty patch of ground where a child had been playing moments earlier. By 8:30 p.m., the family contacted police. And within hours, what began as a frantic family search turned into one of the largest missing person operations in South Australian history. The case gripped the nation almost immediately, because the story didn't fit the usual pattern. This wasn't a crowded park, a suburban street, or a busy road. This was open land, sparse, isolated, with visibility for miles, and yet somehow a 4-year-old had disappeared without leaving a trace. As the days went by, the story of Gus Lamont grew from tragedy to mystery. The search turned up almost nothing. The timeline raised more questions than answers, and the family, especially Gus's father and grandmother, became unwilling participants in a national guessing game. Everyone wanted to know the same thing. How could a child vanish in plain sight in the middle of nowhere? To understand what truly happened, or what might have happened, we have to go back to the beginning. Saturday, September 27th, 2025. It was an ordinary day at Oak Park Station. Warm, quiet, uneventful. Gus had spent most of the afternoon outside, running between the veranda, the shed, and a small mound of dirt near the house. He loved that spot. His grandmother said it was his little mountain. At around 5 p.m., she looked out the kitchen window and saw him still playing. Nothing seemed out of place. The family's 2 dogs were resting in the shade. The property gates were closed. Everything was still. By 5:30 p.m., she stepped outside to call him in for dinner. But when she reached the mound, Gus wasn't there. She called again. No answer. She walked further, expecting to see him crouched behind a rock or wandering toward the shed. But he wasn't. Within 10 minutes, Gus's father joined the search. They checked the paddocks, the nearby creek line, and the sheds. The property stretched for kilometers, open, silent, and exposed. But no matter how far they looked, there were no footprints, no clothes, and no trace of Gus. By 7 p.m., panic had taken over. The sun was setting, temperatures were dropping, and the family realized they were running out of light. At 8:30 p.m., after hours of searching on foot and by vehicle, the call was made to the police. Within hours, a coordinated operation began. South Australia Police, the State Emergency Service, and local volunteers converged on Oak Park. The search quickly expanded, covering an area of nearly 60,000 hectares. Over the next few days, hundreds of personnel scoured the terrain. Drones with infrared cameras flew overhead. Helicopters scanned for heat signatures. Aboriginal trackers guided ground teams through the scrub, following any sign of movement. But the land gave up almost nothing. The only possible clue appeared on September 30th, a single child-sized footprint found about 500 meters from the homestead. It was faint, pressed into soft ground, and consistent with Gus's shoe size. It became the only tangible piece of evidence in an otherwise empty investigation. Search teams expanded the radius, mapping every drainage line and shade pocket. But no follow-up prints appeared. No direction of travel, no dropped items, nothing. By October 3rd, almost a week after the disappearance, Assistant Commissioner Ian Parrott announced that the search would begin to scale back. And just like that, one of Australia's most exhaustive land searches came to a standstill, with no clear answers and a single footprint as its only clue. It was a devastating outcome, but for investigators, the real questions were only just beginning. When the active search for Gus Lamont began, it was one of the most resource-intensive operations in South Australia in recent memory. Helicopters circled for days. Drones equipped with thermal imaging swept the horizon in overlapping grids. Ground teams moved methodically, marking off each section of the vast dry land around Oak Park Station. At its peak, over 100 people were involved each day. Police, military personnel, state emergency service volunteers, and locals. The search was organized into zones, an inner ring around the homestead, then a series of expanding perimeters stretching outward. But there was a problem. The terrain itself seemed to fight back. The outback around Oak Park is deceptive. It looks open and simple, but it's a maze of gullies, scrub, and soft sand. Tracks vanish quickly under the heat. Winds shift footprints. Wildlife disturbs ground markings before investigators can even record them. Despite all the manpower, the area was simply too large. For every 10 kilometers cleared, there were another 50 untouched. Drones flew for hundreds of hours, scanning for heat signatures, disturbed soil, or discarded clothing. Yet, even with advanced infrared sensors, nothing consistent with a human presence was detected. The search dogs trained for scent tracking and cadaver detection were deployed across key sites. But the scent trail ended almost as soon as it began, within meters of where Gus was last seen. It was as though the boy had simply vanished into thin air. Investigators began to question everything. Could Gus have wandered further than expected, or had something else happened entirely? Something within those first unaccounted-for minutes after he disappeared. The focus gradually shifted from pure search to forensic review. Police examined the homestead, the sheds, the vehicles, looking for signs of forced entry, drag marks, or blood. They found none. They interviewed neighbors across the nearest properties, though each was kilometers away. No one reported seeing or hearing anything unusual that day. By October 5th, investigators began compiling a comprehensive timeline, every minute accounted for, every person's movement logged. But the deeper they looked, the more unsettling questions arose. Why did the family's dogs, who had been outside, fail to alert or follow any scent trail? Why were there no secondary footprints or signs of struggle? And how did Gus disappear from a wide, flat area where visibility stretched hundreds of meters in every direction? The community that once surrounded the Lamonts with sympathy began to murmur in confusion. Was this really a case of a child wandering off? Or was something far more complicated unfolding behind closed doors? Authorities didn't say, but they began returning quietly to the property, conducting follow-up examinations under the guise of routine procedure. It wasn't long before the public started asking, what had they found that they weren't telling us? Because in every major investigation, especially one that turns cold this quickly, silence often speaks the loudest. As the days turned into weeks, the search for Gus Lamont shifted from physical effort to psychological endurance. And when the land offered no answers, the public, and eventually the internet, began to fill the silence. Thousands took to social media to dissect the case. Reddit threads, Facebook groups, and online forums dedicated to missing persons lit up with speculation. Some theories sounded reasonable, others were unsettling. But together they painted a picture of collective obsession, a country desperate for closure. The most common explanation, at first, was the simplest, that Gus had wandered off. Outback conditions can be deadly. Children tire quickly, get disoriented, and the Australian wilderness is merciless. Snakes, heat, dehydration. It was plausible, and investigators initially leaned that way. But seasoned trackers pointed out an issue. If he had wandered, there should have been signs. A shirt snagged on a branch, a shoe print, a piece of clothing. There was nothing. That absence pushed the conversation in another direction. The second theory, and the one that captured the public's darkest curiosity, was abduction. Some pointed to the open access roads leading into Oak Park. Anyone familiar with the land could have approached undetected. A passing vehicle, a worker from one of the nearby stations, even a delivery truck. Could someone have driven by at just the right time, seen the child, and acted within seconds? Still, investigators found no tire marks or vehicle impressions consistent with such a scenario. The soil near the property was soft enough to register tracks, yet none appeared. Then there were whispers. The third theory, the possibility that Gus's disappearance might have originated within the property itself. Media outlets avoided speculation, but online discussions were less restrained. They revisited details, the reported argument between Gus's father and grandmother just days earlier, conflicting statements about the exact time he was last seen, and the grandmother's own admission that she'd been inside for a few minutes longer than she thought. None of this proved wrongdoing, but in the absence of evidence, even silence becomes suspicious. And then came the fourth theory, the one that changed everything. When a group of volunteer drone hobbyists returned to the area weeks later, reviewing high-resolution aerial footage, one of them claimed to spot something unusual, a faint rectangular outline in the dirt, about 600 meters from the main house. It wasn't visible from the ground, but from above it stood out. Clean lines, slightly sunken earth, inconsistent with natural erosion. It was the first possible clue in weeks. What happened next would reignite the case and reopen every unanswered question about what truly happened to Gus Lamont. When the footage surfaced, it wasn't the police who found it, it was the public. A drone enthusiast from Port Augusta had been reviewing aerial imagery taken during the volunteer phase of the search. He noticed something no one had flagged before, a faint, rectangular indentation in the dry soil, just beyond the old windmill track that led away from the Lamont homestead. The footage dated back to the second day of the search, meaning it was captured before the area became trampled by foot traffic. That detail mattered. If this outline existed then, it meant it was there before the large-scale search operations disturbed the land. Within hours of the video circulating online, investigators quietly returned to the area. Forensic officers used ground-penetrating radar to scan the site. And though authorities did not publicly confirm what they found, local media reported that a subsurface anomaly, something denser than the surrounding soil, had been detected. That single detail, vague, official, yet heavy with implication, reignited the entire case. Speculation exploded. Was this where Gus had fallen? Was something or someone buried beneath that patch of earth? And if so, why had it been missed before? Experts weighed in. Retired police detective Alan Crowley, who'd worked on several missing person cases in the Outback, said something that struck a chord. If ground radar's picking up density shifts, that could mean anything. A buried object, old fencing, even a water pipe. But if that image was from early in the search, and no one checked it, then we might have missed our chance to understand what really happened. Theories multiplied. Some believed the indentation might mark where an object, or even a vehicle, had once been parked. Others said it could be a depression caused by an underground storage structure. And then, a few went further. Could it be a burial site that had since been disturbed by weather or wildlife? Yet, despite renewed interest, police remained cautious and silent. No new public statements, no confirmation of excavations, only a brief comment from the lead investigator that they were continuing to assess all available data. But silence, in cases like this, often says more than words. If authorities truly believed the site was irrelevant, they'd have dismissed it outright. The fact that they didn't, that they went back quietly, away from cameras, made many wonder what they'd really found. In that moment, one thing became clear. This wasn't just about where Gus might have gone anymore. It was about what, or who, might have been closer to him than anyone realized. For the Lamont family, time has not dulled the ache, it's only deepened it. Each sunrise over the Outback still carries the same haunting question. Where is Gus? In the months since his disappearance, the family's home has become a paradox of presence and absence. Gus's toys remain untouched in a small wooden crate on the veranda, the same spot where he was last seen playing. His father, Daniel, has been described by neighbors as a man living in rewind, replaying the day, the route, the moments before his son vanished. His mother, quietly withdrawn from public view, has left all media requests unanswered. And the grandmother, who was home at the time Gus disappeared, continues to live under the heavy shadow of scrutiny and whispers that never fully fade. The search teams who spent weeks combing the land have spoken about the toll too. Some still remember the deafening silence of those nights, when even the wildlife seemed to pause as though listening. One volunteer said in an interview, "We'd call his name into the wind and it would carry. But nothing ever came back. It's something you never forget." The wider community, once united by hope, now sits in a quiet divide. Some believe Gus's fate was sealed within those first critical hours, that he wandered off too far, too fast, and the vastness of the desert swallowed him whole. Others hold on to a darker possibility, that someone knows more than they've said, and that a secret still lingers beneath the surface of that barren land. Even among investigators, exhaustion has turned to obsession. A few insiders speaking off the record say that the drone discovery reignited internal debates within the department. Whether the anomaly was ever truly examined or quietly dismissed remains a point of contention. But for those who were there, the feeling is the same. Unfinished business. This is what unsolved cases do. They don't just fade, they ferment. They burrow into the lives of everyone they touch. For the Lamonts, the unanswered questions have become part of their daily rhythm, a silence that hums louder than words. For the searchers, it's a wound that never fully closes. And for the rest of us, it's a reminder that even in a world of satellites, drones, and data, a child can still vanish without a trace. Because somewhere in that stretch of red earth, beneath the heat and the silence, something still waits to be found. As the sun sets over the South Australian Outback, the land falls silent again. The same silence that began the moment Gus Lamont disappeared. It's a silence that holds too many questions and not enough answers. Did the drone's camera truly glimpse the start of an answer? Or was it just another shadow in a place that keeps its secrets well? For now, the official line remains unchanged. There is no confirmed trace of Gus Lamont. But for those who have followed this story, the case is no longer just about a missing child. It's about what happens when hope meets uncertainty, when families search for truth in a world where technology can see everything, yet somehow still miss the most important thing. Because every search leaves behind something, a trail of questions, a scar on a landscape, and a silence that demands to be filled. And perhaps that's the real mystery here. Not just where Gus went, but why, after all the searching, we still can't see what's right in front of us. If you have any information, contact South Australia Police or Crime Stoppers. And if you believe every story deserves answers, share this video, subscribe, and help keep Gus's name alive, because sometimes the smallest voices need the loudest echo.